Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Divorce Coaching Podcast with myself, Tom Nash, Mr. Divorce Coach, and Faye Petcher from Feel Positive Coaching. Hi, Faye. How you doing?
Hi, good to be here again, and hi to Jen.
Yeah. Today, we've got another guest for you. We have Jen Gallagher, one of my other Instagram friends. She's an awesome co-parenting coach and extremely funny on Instagram as well. Always makes my day. Her firm is based out in Florida, and she is her company is called Single Parenting Solutions. So, hey, Jen from Florida, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
So I am very happy to be here, and I appreciate you guys reaching out and having me on your show. And I've subscribed to your channel, and I really like the guests that come on and find the information really valuable, especially because I am my son's young, so we haven't gone to the things of teenage years and forwarding like that yet.
I've got to say, before we get started, Jen, you were up really early because you were messaging me on Instagram when it was morning for me. So I was like, it's 3 a.m. there. Like, what are you doing up this early, getting that prepared? Well, before we kind of delve into it and find out a little bit more about the awesome work that you do and how you help people and like your specialisms, like what's your story, Jen? What led you to being a co-parenting coach?
Well, I have been co-parenting with my son's dad for the past pretty much 6 years, a little bit more than that. My son's dad and we had separated when I was pregnant. So we actually, throughout the pregnancy, obviously, as a woman, I invited him into the process, whatever he wanted to do. And it was a really nice dynamic that we started out with. And since my son was born, we've been co-parenting ever since. Our son is 5.5. So we've been co-parenting his whole life. So he does not have any type of experience or recollection, or just hasn't, kind of had that switch in dynamic of like having married parents to separated parents. And I found that even with that comes a lot of different challenges. So when I was trying to find out all these different answers to all these questions that I had during pregnancy, after he was born, about how to best kind of work through challenges or how best to support our son, I wasn't able to find the resources that I felt were aligned with child development. And then also that they were too general. Many of them were like, for example, like, don't argue in front of your children. And it's like, I don't know. I don't wake up, or I don't think that somebody's like, I want to start an argument in front of my child. It's something that comes in the moment, but I wanted to know deeper. I wanted to have, more answers. I wanted to have, about attachment and all that kind of stuff. And I have a background in clinical social work. So I have a master's degree in clinical social work with a concentration of child development. So what I found is that I had to really just piece things together of my education, my clinical experience working with kids and families, and kind of had to like put my creative spin on all of this and do it. And I felt as though that there was a need for this type of resource for co-parenting with families who have young kids, like under the age of 8, because I feel as though they're different needs than maybe cell phone use and things that are kind of talked about a lot. So that's why I started Single Parenting Solutions, because I felt that there was a lack of resources readily available for parents with young kids.
Co-parenting from birth, though, that is a first that I know of, or even pre-birth, with co-parenting from pregnancy. But and like you say, those early years, child development of how they're going to integrate and operate in that world is going to be so different to, I suppose, mine or Faye's scenario, where our kids are older and prepubescent and teenagers and all of the rest of it. So that's a real specialist area that for you to work in. I was going to ask, actually, because I think I mentioned it, but I was going to ask you a question about, like, how did your son adjust? But obviously he never had to adjust because it was always from the start. So I'm now trying to think about how to reframe my question about, does he have questions about, like, other kids at school whose parents maybe are separating? For him, he must think, well, actually, this is the way it is. Like, does it cause a whole multitude of different questions?
So what I found is that there was this kind of assumption that I had that he would just be used to it. Like, this was just going to be his norm and he would be used to it. However, there's like almost like this still confusion of why mommy and daddy don't live in, it's more like mommy and daddy don't live in the same home.
Yeah.
That's more of kind of that concrete thinking versus like they're not in love with each other, like all those kind of things.
Yeah.
So it's more of like, why doesn't mommy and daddy live together? And I see all these books and I, watch TV shows and all that kind of stuff. And it's still kind of making sense of it all. And you can explain and you can support maybe those big feelings of having to go back and forth and separating from one parent to the other. But they resurface within each like developmental stage of like their comprehension growing. Yeah. So there'll be different questions that kind of arise, uncomfortable questions because they're not a child's lens is not filtered. So it's like we're literally just blank. And so it's more of, it's like a different challenge, I guess, if you would say, versus like restructuring. And what was the second part that you had said?
Just about if he came up with different questions than maybe a child whose parents were together beforehand. So you kind of answered it really, because he's going to have a very different approach and idea. And you made a really good point there about representation. So when he sees like books, TV programs, etc., that's got to be a bit confusing. About, hold on, well, those parents live together. So
yeah, it's interesting because in like the media kind of world, especially like in Disney and TV and cartoons and stuff, it's either you see like a 2-parent home or you see a single parent, however, with a loss in the family. Yes. So it's either, a mom who's passed away or a dad who's passed away, which is a lot of the narrative of Disney movies. But it's not a child going from one home to the other. Yeah. So that's a little confusing. And because this was his like life experience from like so young, he took on this like normative, like you said, like it was like his life experience and that's just what it is. So when he got to preschool, it was interesting because of the way he speaks of mama's house and daddy's house. And that would confuse a lot of the children. And we happened to go to an amazing Montessori school, and they incorporated my son's, I guess, life experience into their teaching. And they would have books on parents who have separated and different types of families. Oh. So it really was nice. They even rephrased some of the events that they had. Like there was like a Father's Day tea where they changed it to special persons tea. So because I would go to the event, so he wouldn't have, so his grandfather would be there, so it wasn't really his father. Yeah. So it was really nice to see that support extended outside the home.
Oh, that sounds amazing, Jen. It takes me back because my first husband, we split up when my daughter was 1. She's 18 this year, so I'm getting to that moment where I can say she's an adult now. And looking back and how proud I am that we both managed to co-parent all those years. And going back to what you said about my son, my daughter doesn't have any knowledge. She thinks it's very odd that we were together. and laughs about it. And she just took it in her stride. She, when we go to parents' evening, sometimes she used to get really quite anxious, thinking, I'm not used to you and dad being together in the same room. So, I think kids are really kind of resilient, especially if it's normal to them. And I think she was probably in her teens when she started asking more sort of questions. Well, why did you split up? What happens? So I think I do agree. It depends what age and stage, what relationships they have with both parents, how they are in character. And so I think it's amazing. So I wanted to ask you, Jen, what do you think that children worry about most when their parents split up? What generally do you find?
Well, from a restructuring of the family, that it's their fault. And I feel in a way that, because like developmentally and the way that they think in this concrete manner and their limited understanding of pretty much like what grownups are saying, this will come across their mind no matter how much that you show compassion and reassurance that it isn't their fault. And my advice would be that it is okay that this may come up again, and that you're not doing something wrong as a parent if they continue to maybe feel as though this may be their fault, but just keep on the path of reassuring them, and not just say it through your words, but also through your actions.
Yeah, to be consistent then is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm okay. Sorry.
So what would you say your co-parenting highs but also lows have been?
Our co-parenting highs have been, well, we've had an interesting dynamic, my son's dad and I, and we spent as much time as we could together with our son, staying within, certain boundaries and that kind of stuff. But we would spend a lot of time at each other's home. We would have dinner a lot. We would take him to different events. We both really enjoyed experiencing a lot of his firsts together as much as possible. Like we had gone trick-or-treating together for pretty much up until this year, because my son wanted to go with his friends. It was the first year that it was like, now going on to the next step of like going with his friends from kindergarten. So, but we did a lot of those things together. And Christmas morning, opening presents, his dad would come over. So I feel as though, even though personality clashes and disagreements and stuff like that, behind the scenes, and, maybe even having to like step away for a minute to kind of take a breath, we did a really good job of doing that and really keeping our son in mind in that whole, and leaving like our ego and our grown-up problems out of it as much as we could. I mean, we're also human, so we're also human. And lows have been the pandemic. Lows have been the pandemic, and also the restructuring of, or the additions to his family. So like the change in co-parenting dynamic, and that's been a little challenging as well. So
has he got now, what is that, new siblings on that his dad's?
Yes.
Right.
Dating, and then a marriage, and a new sibling, and now another new sibling on the way. So, and in a pandemic where, just naturally us grownups have this heightened sense of anxiety about, health and so many other grown-up issues. So that's been very challenging. It's had its challenges. It's kind of evening out, but a lot of major changes just in anybody's life is challenging. And with a very young child who pretty much soaks in all of those changes, it's very confusing and it comes out in behavior. So that's been really the most challenging.
That was a really good point, because I had made a note that I was going to ask you about behaviour, specifically because you really focus in the early years, early stages of child development. So what sort of things behavioural wise and potential impacts could someone that's watching this that is maybe very early stages of a separation or a divorce, and they have a child that's under 8 years old, so very much early years, what sort of things could they anticipate and how could they approach them? What sort of things could they do? What advice would you give?
So a lot of, I guess you'd say, behavior challenges may arise around transitions. So what I call transitions are exchange days, or there's many different legal or cultural, different countries of words for it. I call it transitions because it's almost like a way that you can think of or a mindset of more like parenting versus like a legal structure of somebody that, I mean, in better words, like you own, because that's kind of, from a court system, that's kind of what it comes down to. But so it's transitioning your child from your care to your co-parent's care. And I feel as though that can bring on, well, it just does. It brings on a lot of challenges, whether it's separating from the one caregiver or it's at the other home, and maybe the adjustment stress from going from the one home to the other home carries into the other home. Yeah. So, and the problem I think many of us grown-ups have is that we view our children's behavior as something that's kind of a problem and problematic, versus it's just their way of communicating, whether it's their emotions that they don't have a name to, whether it's an unmet need where it's really that they're hungry or they're tired or something like that, just a basic need. Maybe it's a need for more connection, which is what we think of as attention and them being needy, but it's really that they want to connect with us and they want to feel important and seen on their time. So, or it's on their time, because that's pretty much how they see the world. And then also unmastered skills. So, and that also plays a role in the language of being able to put these feelings and emotions and thoughts that they have, their language development, they're not able to communicate, they're not able to identify those kind of things because they don't have that base for it. They're learning that base right now. And, even listening skills, that's something that children haven't mastered yet, so a lot of that, it's really that they're communicating to you, and that's challenging to kind of be a detective in that moment to figure out what they are communicating, which usually causes us grown-ups to become triggered and and sometimes lose it, which is normal, because when we're under stress, what are we going to do? We're going to have big feelings with that. But then when you have two people having big feelings, it's very difficult for them to kind of go away and settle down.
And I suppose it's reassuring the parents as well that these kind of behaviours in their children, it's absolutely normal, isn't it? These feelings of not feeling safe or maybe regression. I know some clients have come to me panicking because the child isn't sleeping through the night, or they've had to put them back in nappies and things. And, it's just kind of that, like you say, that transition period, which just reassuring the parents that actually that this is normal, and just be there and be consistent and be supportive and help your child through the next steps, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's this thing where we also think, because we may be consistent in our home, that even though the other home might be doing the same kind of things, it's still different. It's still a different way of doing bath time. It's still a different way of maybe the timeline of your bedtime routine. It's still, maybe their sleep situation might be different. Maybe they don't have a nightlight over there, or, you know, so all those kind of things where it brings up a little bit more confusion and also inconsistency, which is also normal. That's what I feel as though we have to, as parents, we have to normalize that it is normal that there is going to be inconsistency.
Yeah.
And that is okay. It's really how you respond to your child when they are impacted by the inconsistency. I mean, they go to school and they have a different routine at school than they do at home.
Yeah.
You know,
It's also about how the co-parents interact with each other about the inconsistency to
yes,
try and level that out and find, like you said, really simple things sometimes about, well, actually they haven't got a nightlight at yours, and that's the one thing that's upsetting them. Or something that they need. It's about how you get them there. So actually that was going to lead me to ask about, what would you describe, and again I'm really kind of focusing on early years kind of child development here, I mean, in terms of co-parenting side, because I know that's your forte, but what would you say some of the kind of common potential challenges that co-parents have made for themselves, or what others might deem as mistakes in the co-parenting world? Like, what do you witness with your clients? What's the kind of common thing that comes up quite a lot?
well, I feel as though there's a common theme where the focus is so much on the parent-parent relationship.
Yeah.
And even though that there is all of these kind of sayings and they have to do with your child, they don't really, the focus is lost about the child and their needs, or kind of really what's going on. And I feel as though that you can, it doesn't have to be even. It doesn't have to be even. Say a co-parent doesn't have the same type of parenting style or connection with their child. Like, that doesn't necessarily have to be there to have your child like thrive and feel loved and feel seen and feel heard. A lot of those things, we focus too much on the smaller things, where like the bigger things, where, you know, sometimes safety concerns or bigger things, they get lost because it's just another kind of nag.
Yeah.
So I think the mistake too is that not seeing the child in everything, and really focusing on you and the other parent. And then also with boundaries too. I feel a lot of times there's this kind of idea that when we talk about boundaries, that it's about us, and we miss where our children kind of fit in a role in all of that.
Yeah.
And it's really evaluating that, hey, can I meet my needs and also the needs of my child? You know, and kind of seeing, and it's only something that you can determine because everybody's boundaries are unique, but it's like, are you doing something, or are you holding a boundary that's actually a weapon of revenge?
Yeah.
You know, or is it, you know, because that's only something you can determine.
Is it a harbored resentment? And yeah. I was say, because I always have to challenge my clients and say to them quite a lot of the times around getting out of their own ways, not creating their own obstacles, but also where's it coming from and who's benefiting from it, both short, medium, and longer term. Sorry, Faye, you were going to ask a question.
No, it's right. I'm just going back to when Jen was talking about, you know, how hard it's been over the pandemic, and I was just quite keen to ask you, I mean, are you seeing the same sort of problems during the pandemic with parents that are separating as regards to being a single parent? You know, what is coming up for you with your clients over the pandemic and being a single parent?
Well, what's coming up a lot is that many times in this particular like environment, there's a lot of dependence on parenting plans and legal documents.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty much talked about and encouraged and things like that. Well, a lot of the things during the pandemic are not inside the legal documents. And because the court systems are all backed up or maybe closed and things like that, there's a lot of this, what am I supposed to do? Because I've been so dependent on, kind of maybe calling my lawyer or, going on those means. And that communication of being able to problem solve and kind of on your own gets kind of, it's almost like foreign territory. And, so I feel as though there needs to be something, or this could be a really good opportunity to kind of figure out those kind of skills and collaboration skills during this time, under these circumstances.
Yeah, without having to rely on lawyers or the court system.
Yeah.
As you said, everything's taking time, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, there's definitely a need for that. I mean, and that's the hard thing about this kind of area, is that everybody has different, everything is so complex, I mean, even if I go into research about co-parenting, all of it says from like a psychological standpoint that it is up to discussion and debate, because it really lies within the dynamics of the situation. So there isn't really any type of guidelines. In a way, it's really up to everybody's interpretation. So that's kind of, everything is so complex. So if it goes into like an abuse category, of course, that needs to be completely taken in consideration. But that's also above my my ethics of being able to work with. I don't feel that's in my realm.
Yeah.
So how do you work with your clients then, Jen? So if we've got any of our audience listeners on or YouTube podcast, whatever they're watching or listening on, and they have a child that's 8 years or younger, and they're maybe in their early stages potentially of a separation or divorce, or indeed if someone is currently pregnant and they've already separated, and obviously walking a similar path to yourself, right? How can you assist clients? What sort of work do you do with them?
So what we would do first is we would schedule a call together, because the way that I work might not be best suited for the client or the parents' kind of ideas. A lot of the work that I do and kind of getting down deep into that self-awareness, and also the pretty much approach to parenting is more of a conscious way of parenting versus a traditional stance on parenting. I might not be the best fit to help, because there's so many different ways of people and kind of relationship dynamics. But if we are a good fit, then we would start working on first kind of connecting with the parent self, because I feel as though when you connect with yourself, you can better become a better parent. And then once you work on interacting and parenting in a conscious way with your child, using self-regulation skills, kind of seeing like the big picture, having that self-awareness with somebody that you love unconditionally, you're practicing and using those skills to carry out into other relationships that you might not love unconditionally, and you can become a better co-parent in the outcome. And that doesn't mean that your co-parent has to change. That means that you step into the situations in a different way than maybe you had been. That's kind of keeping that conflict dynamic going.
Okay.
Oh, it's amazing. I know we're going to run out of time soon, but so I wanted to ask you, Jen, so if you got a client coming to you like Tom had said, that was just separating, looking to co-parent, what are the kind of the tips that you will give to them for the first thing that they can do, apart from what we talked about, having that self-awareness, working on yourself? And me and Tom are always talking about, you've got to fill up your own battery before you can fill up somebody else's, and be the best parent you can be. What other tips and support do you give to parents that are just starting out?
So starting out, before you make any type of like contract or even like a legal document, what I would suggest, for parents is to think about when you're doing transitions that one parent from the house that they're going from is dropping off, because it gives the impression and the idea to your child that their one parent is handing them over to the care of their other parent versus taking them away.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and it even though it may seem very small, the impact can be huge. It can be huge and more comfortable for our children. Another thing is to think about maybe a lot of times children will have anxiety leaving maybe the primary caregiver at one time, if they've been used to, having that one secure base, which is normal. I mean, you think about going to preschool, that it's sometimes hard to get into that classroom. So what I would also suggest is not only building connection and attachment and strengthening that bond within your home, but you can do things to cultivate connection even with them and their other parents. So, and that could look like having an attachment toy or an attachment stuffed animal for overnights at the same home, or the same attachment toy at each home. Because also our children are physically dependent on us. So them bringing their things is not their responsibility, it's ours.
Yeah.
And how many times do you forget to do those kind of things? And it's literally not like, oh, it's okay, you'll be fine. It's literally the end of the world to a child to have something that they are so attached to.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I would suggest having them pick out something that they can have both at, either parent's home, and that will give that sense of secure attachment no matter where they are. So that, and then also having photos of the other parent in your home with them, that might be challenging for somebody to do. But if you also think about it, you can also keep them at eye level of your child, because really the photos are for your child. Yeah. So they're not in your view, because they would be for the child. So I have a gallery wall, and the bottom couple photos are of my son with his dad. In his room, he has a photo of me and his dad and him together, and it's in this like art kind of thing. So it's almost like disguise.
Critical battery, please charge.
So
I love that. And actually, you were even making me think about my own personal situation. I was just thinking, I take the kids to my ex-wife's and her boyfriends, and on the days that they're coming here, she brings them to mine. And like, we have a bit of an open door policy. If we're home, it's unlocked, like you just walk in. So she comes in with the bags and the kids, but it also helps us have a better co-parenting relationship, because she comes in the door and I'll be like, hey, do you want a cup of tea? And we have a chat for 5-10 minutes, and like we're both saying to the kids, like, get your uniforms in the wash, put your school shoes away, and then she kind of goes off. But again, it's that nice transition of, rather than I'm outside on the driveway beeping my horn, calling, saying, send them out, it's 5 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they come out all kind of skulking and upset, and they don't want to leave, and things like that. So I completely agree with that. And I love the eye level pictures. That's the sort of stuff that when people are talking about like boundaries and ideas and things like that, they use those lovely buzzwords, but that's the kind of information that we'd love to share with our audiences, to go, hey, look, put up some pictures of the other parent in your home. Oh, I couldn't do that. We'll put them down here because he's only 5. I hadn't thought of that. That makes great sense. You as the parent, you could probably walk in past thinking, I could kick it in a minute, but but I think that's an awesome idea. Cool. Look, Jen, thank you so much for coming on. We've actually run out of time today, but if any of our audience want to get in touch with you, I'm glad we put you in touch. But how do people find you?
Well, I am primarily on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram like all day, every day, pretty much. And you can find me at singleparingsolutions.com or Single Parenting Solutions. And then also my website is singleparingsolutions.com. My email is jen@singleparentingsolutions.com. And you can send me a DM or email me, and we can take it from there.
And if you still can't find her, Googling all that, just get in contact with me on Play and we'll introduce you. But definitely go and follow Jen's Instagram. Loads of useful tips, loads of really funny little reels as well, which is really, really cool. So Jen, thanks so much for coming on today. It was really lovely to have you on, and
amazing.
Thank you again for having me. I feel like this is a privilege. So thank you so much.
That's good. Thanks, Jen. Take care, and I hope it's nice and sunny in Florida.
Take care.
Bye.